Is my voice clearly audible to everyone?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So yeah, started the recording. Start with today's discussion. Let me share my screen. Please let me know once the screen is visible to you all. I hope the screen is visible. So yeah. In the last class, if you remember, we were talking about the different storage modes in Power BI, and in that we imported the data in the import mode as well as the direct query mode, and we looked at some of the differences that are quite evident. Okay, and the main inherent difference between the two is that when we import the data or we store the data in Power BI by using the import mode of storage, then the data is actually in Power BI, and Power BI makes use of a compressor. Okay, a compressor which is called a compressor engine. Can anyone tell me what's the name of that compressor? Anyone remembers? It's called Vertipack compressor engine. Okay, and what it does is the data which is brought into the Power BI, it compresses that data a bit and then it stores it into the Power BI itself. Okay, and the case in direct query is that whenever you uh, try to get the data in the direct query mode, the data is not actually into Power BI, but it just establishes a connection from Power BI to the backend. Okay, and the data actually stays in the backend. It's just that we establish the connection. Okay, so now let's look at some of the important differences. Now here, when it comes to import mode, presently the amount of data that can be stored in one PBIX in the import mode, it varies from 10 GB to 100 GB. Now 10 GB, if you are the PPU user, that is the Power BI premium per user license user, then it's at 10 GB. However, if you're using premium per capacity, which is another kind of license available within Power BI service, then this goes on till 100 GB. Okay, so that much of data can be stored in one PBX file. Okay, whereas when it comes to direct query, there's no such kind of limitation. Unlimited amount of data can be brought into Power BI because the fact is that data is not actually into Power BI. It just is in the backend. We just establish the connection. So there is no such kind of limitation when it comes to direct query. Now, there's one more thing. When you use the direct query, your data must come from a single source. Whereas when you use the import mode, the data can come from multiple sources. What does it mean? It means that, let's say, when you're using the import mode, one file you can get from, let's say, a CSV file, another from, let's say, an Excel file, another from, let's say, a Snowflake, another from, let's say, Oracle DB, IBM DB, so on and so. There is no limitation to the amount of, I mean, to the data that you can get from the different data sources. However, when it comes to direct query mode, your data must come from a single source. Okay, it can be and it should definitely be the database. Either it can be SSMS or MySQL or Postgre or anything it is, but it should come from the single source. Okay, then when it comes to performance, this is the data. When we are using the import mode, it has the high performance, whereas when the direct query is being used, the performance, actually speaking, it is kind of deteriorated compared to this. Do you know what's the main reason for that? Can anyone tell me? Think. Yes. The reason for high performing ability of import mode is that in import mode, the data is actually into Power BI. or data is in Power BI, and that's the reason whenever you want to do any transformation, it doesn't take a lot. Whereas here, you need to depend on the backend connection. If the backend connection is kind of slow, then your performance in Power BI also will take a hit. Okay, that's the main reason. Okay, and this is very important thing. Data change in the underlying data. Let's say you are getting data, and let me ask you this question. Let's say you are getting the data from SSMS into Power BI. Okay, and you're using two types of connections. Let's say in one instance you are using SSMS, but in import mode, and in second instance, again, you're using SSMS to bring the data, but in direct query mode. Okay. Now, when you do any changes in the backend, let's say in the backend, which is SSMS, you add two extra columns and some extra records. Okay. And when you do that, where it will be immediately reflected, whether in the import mode instance or in the direct query mode instance. Is the question clear in the first place?
Import mode.
Import mode. Why is that so?
Because it's in Power BI. Like the
You're not
data is in Power BI.
Power BI, right? What I said is you're doing the changes in the backend. That is SSMS, right? Is the question clear to everyone in first place? Okay, let me just use the. Let's say we have two instances. Okay, one is input. Second one is direct query. Now, let's say we are bringing the data from SSMS in both the instances. SSMS to PBI. The same thing here as well. Now, my question is that, let's say the backend, which is SSMS, right? SQL Server Management Studio. There, you did some transformations. Like, let's say you added some extra columns, maybe some extra process. Now, the question is that, where, in which instance, this is instance one, this is instance two, in which instance it will be immediately reflected in Power BI?
So it will be reflected in direct query mode because it has a connection. But in import mode, it should require a refresh.
Exactly. See, the thing is, it will be immediately reflected in direct query mode because in the direct query mode, the data is not in Power BI, but just a connection. And connection is there with the backend. And whenever any change happens in the backend, immediately that will be reflected in the front end as well. However, here in the import mode, the data from backend is brought into Power BI and it is stored in Power BI with the help of a Vertipack compressor engine. So any change that happens in the backend, for it to reflect in the front end, we have to refresh that here. Is this clear to everyone? Yes or no? Okay. So this is one of the very important things. Okay. So always do remember that, because this is the inherent difference between import and direct query. Okay. So here, the data will be stored in the cache memory. Okay. And here, the data will not be stored because it's coming from the backend, as simple as that. And this is one of the important things, the scheduled refresh. Okay. It means, let's say, how many refreshes are possible per day. Okay. When we're using both. So let's say if you have premium capacity license, okay, there are different licenses in Power BI Free, Power BI Pro, premium per user, premium capacity. Okay, these are the different licenses. Let's say you have the highest possible license, which is premium capacity or even the premium per user. Okay, So when you are in import mode, the number of refreshes that are possible per day, and when I say per day, I mean per 24 hours. Okay, so per 24 hours, 48 refreshes are possible. Okay, which means almost every half an hour you can schedule one refresh. Whereas when you are in direct query mode, there's no such thing as scheduled refresh. The thing is, you whenever something change happens in the backend, that will be immediately reflected. Okay, so these are the important differences between the import mode and direct query mode. Is this clear with everyone? Any doubts till now, people? From anyone? Yes. Okay. Now, yeah, I have a doubt. Okay. Now, think about this. Why do we need, why do we need different modes of storage then? Yes. Any reason that the direct query mode also exists? Think. Okay. See, what if you look at the Microsoft's their own recommendation? Okay. So what they do is they recommend that when you have huge data, okay, huge data in the sense the data wherein the number of rows are in terms of hundreds or 200 millions or maybe in terms of billions. Okay, so if that is the case, Microsoft they themselves suggest that you use the direct query mode. Okay, because in the direct query mode there is no data restriction. Okay, so that's the reason, according to Microsoft, direct query exists or direct query mode exists. But when you actually start working in Power BI, and especially if you try to work on direct query mode, the working part in direct query mode is not as simple as Microsoft tell that it is. Because one difference, you know that if you remember in the last class, I brought the data in direct query mode as well as in import mode. In direct query mode, you cannot see the table view. Remember that, people? There are three views in Power BI. One is, importantly, there are three views. One is report view, table view, and model view. Okay. And amongst these, in table view, what you'll be able to see, you will be able to see the actual tables and the columns and records. But when you are in direct query mode, you cannot see the table views. So you'll not be able to see the values at all. Next thing, there's a thing called as DAX in Power BI, and DAX is a front-end coding language of Power BI by which the reporting of Power BI can be customized. Okay, so when you are in direct query mode, there's a kind of restriction to certain DAX that can be used. The thing is, certain DAX statements cannot be used when you are in direct query mode. So that is one more big problem, because if DAX is limited, it means that your reporting capability itself will be limited. As simple as that. So due to these restrictions, people don't prefer using the direct query. Most of the organizations in any of their projects, they try to prefer import mode itself, no matter how huge the data is, because currently the amount of data that can be stored per PBIX if you are using a premium license is almost up to 100 GB. Okay, so this is how it works in the real-time scenarios. Okay, so now if you remember, I told you that there's one more connection, one more type of connection which is there in Power BI, which is called live connection. Okay, and I also told you that the live connection is very much similar to direct query, but there is one inherent difference. And that one difference is that in live connection, the data that can be brought into Power BI will be of analytical form of data or cube form of data. Now, do you guys know what is meant by cube form of data? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes? How about the rest? Let me just try to give you the gist of how it looks like, the cube form of data. Just a second. I hope this is visible to everyone. Okay. Now, if you look at this kind of representation, okay, there are three axes to it. Okay. If you look at x-axis, it's called measures. Okay, let me talk about measures later. But if you look at y-axis, what do we have? The product types. Can you see this? These are nothing but the product types. One is accessories, bikes, clothings, components, right? And if you look at z-axis, what do we have here in z-axis? Anyone? Yes, people?
Time frame.
Yeah, it is the time frame, right? Time frame in the sense it's basically timeline, is it? From 2015 Jan till 2015 May. Okay. Now, here, measures in the sense there will be certain facts which will help you define your business or which will help you analyze your business to be in fact. The facts like what is the sales amount, what is the profit, what is the profit margin, what is the return quantity, what is the order quantity. Okay. Now let's say this particular cube on x-axis, it says sales amount. Okay, let's say this is sales amount. Then, actually speaking, what is this cube showing? Can anyone tell me? Let's say this is sales amount. Let's say this is profit. Let's say this is order quantity. Let's say this is return quantity. Let's say this is profit margin. Now, when I say this is sales amount, what I actually mean in terms of business? Yes. This is the sales amount for which product? Which product type?
Components.
Components, great. And in which timeline? Yes.
Jan 2015.
Jan 2015, right? Similarly, when I say this particular cube, what it shows me?
Components
Profit.
2015 Feb.
Components 2015, no, not Feb. Feb is here, right? The second cube, which is behind this, which comes below this. Hope you're understanding this. I'm talking about still the first.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So let's say this is order quantity. Then it is order quantity for components when in 2015 Jan. Getting the point, people?
Yes.
Okay. Similarly, if I talk about this cube, then again it's the order quantity, but for which product?
Feb 2050.
Product is accessories, happened in the timeline 2015 Feb. Okay. So this form of data is called as cube form of data. Okay. This form of data is called as cube form of data, or in one more way, it can be called as analytical form of data. And this kind of data comes from the tools like Azure Analysis Services and sometimes from SSAS as well. Okay. So yeah, this when you use this kind of data to establish a direct query to get it into Power BI, that happens by a thing called as live connection. Okay. And live connection works exactly similar to direct query. Only difference is that in live connection, in direct query, you have the 2D form of data, whereas in live query, you have the cube form of data. In direct query, you have the 2D form of data, like we used earlier. Okay, whereas in this, it's like this. Hope the difference is clear, people. Yes or no? Okay, fine.
Import mode, same like a 2D form of the data, right?
Come again?
For import mode. So direct query, we have 2D form. So what about import mode?
In import mode, again, we have the 2D form of
2D.
data itself. Yeah. Okay. Have you guys heard about the thing called as Azure Databricks? Yes.
S.
So Azure Databricks looks like this itself. Okay. So if you try to bring the data from Azure Databricks, it will be of the cube form of data. So yeah. So coming back to this one. Okay. So this is the difference between the different storage modes in Power BI, and it's a very important concept because this will be asked in the interviews as well. What are the different ways in which the data can be brought into Power BI? Or they will definitely ask you what is the difference between the direct query and import mode. Okay, and maybe even live connection as well. So that's what the main differences are. Okay, so now let's start looking into transforming the data in Power BI by using the in-house Power Query editing tool, in-house transformation tool or ETL tool in Power BI called as Power Query Editor. Okay, and for that, what I'll do is I'll try to get the data. And before that, yeah, this is also important. Before you start doing the transformations in Power Query Editor in Power BI, you have to do certain settings in your system with respect to Power BI itself. Okay, so what you need to do, and these are important because if you don't do this, what will happen is some of the transformations Power BI does on itself automatically. But I don't want it to happen. I want you to know all the transformations that you can do. Okay, so that's the reason we are doing these settings. And later, once we are done with Power Query Editor, we'll change it back to default. But for now, you need to do these change of settings. So file and then options and settings, and then again options. Okay, and here you need to go to the global, and under global there is data load, and in the data load it by default is set to the type detection is by default set to always detect the column types and headers for unstructured sources. Okay, and you need to set it to never detect column types. Okay, else what will happen, that transformation again automatically will be done by Power BI, but I don't want to happen. We have to do it ourselves in this case because we want to learn the stuff. And then next thing again, this is fine. And one more thing, yeah, in global again there's a thing called as regional. It is, yeah, regional settings. And in the regional settings, you set it to US by default. English US, this one. Okay. So this is what you set it to, because if you don't, then again it will start following the regional settings from different regions. Okay, we'll set it to English United States, and then again for this as well we'll set it to English United States. Okay, after this you go to the current file. In the current file again there is this data load. Okay, and I think this is fine. And then here also in the regional settings, you make sure that it is set to English United States. And once this is done, you just click on OK. So OK, and I think it says the setting requires a restart. Let's try to open it once again. Just I'll close it and I'll open once again. Now, once again, I'll go to options and settings and let me check whether the changes that I've set have been applied or not. Yeah, if you see, it's now set to never detect. And again, the regional settings, US, same thing is here as well. Okay, fine. Now let's try to bring the data into Power BI and let's try to start the transformations step by step. Okay, so first of all, let me go to get data, and the file that I'm going to bring is the CSV file. So I'll go to this one, August 2017 unprocessed, and now one question I want to ask: when you bring the data from CSV or Excel or some flat file, what mode it is using by default? Import mode or direct query mode?
Import.
Import mode, because as I said, direct query is possible only with the databases, not with the flat files. Okay. Now, if you look at this data, does it seem to be clean data, or do you think it needs lots of transformation? Yes.
Need transformation.
Data transformation are needed, right? So if you need the data transformation, you need to go to you need to go to Power Query Editor. And how to go to do that?
Transform data.
Transform data. So I'll click on transform data. Okay. And let's say if you're, I'll show you one more way because that's also needed. I'll close this Power Query Editor. Just close and apply. Not done any changes. Now let's say you are in Power BI desktop. Then how are you going to go? How will you go to Power Query Editor? This I showed in one of the last classes.
Transform data.
Yeah, in the home tab, there is the transform data button. Okay, you just need to click on this transform data and you'll be taken back to Power Query Editor. Okay, so this is how it is. Now, if you look at this data, or first of all, let me try to talk about this view a bit. Okay, the GUI of Power Query Editor. First of all, Power Query Editor is one more window. Okay, apart from Power BI Desktop. This is Power BI Desktop. This is Power Query Editor. And in Power Query Editor, the main two panels that you need to look into is left-hand panel and the right-hand panel. In the left-hand panel, you will see all the tables that you have brought in here. Currently, there's only one table, which is Orders 2017. So only one table is listed. In the right side panel, you will see the applied transformation steps one by one as you go on applying those. Okay, so that is the main thing. And then there are some different tabs like transform tab, add column tab, view tab, tool tab, help tab. Okay, all of these for doing certain kind of transformations and changing the settings which we'll go through step by step. Okay, first of all, now we are in home tab. Okay, now let me ask you this: what do you think is the first thing that we need to do here? Try to think. Yes.
Removing the unwanted rows.
Removing the unwanted
Rows or data.
rows, right? So if you look at this, which particular row do you think is the column header in this?
Fifth row.
Fifth row, right? Fifth row is the column header. So if we need to, so what we need to do is we need to delete some initial rows. How many rows we need to delete there? First 4 rows should be deleted, right? Okay, so we'll do exactly that. So here in home tab itself, you have the option called as remove rows. And if you look at this drop down, there are various ways in which you can remove the rows. So here what I'll select is remove top rows. And when I click on remove top rows, it'll ask me how many top rows that I want to remove. So how many? Yes,
4.
top 4 rows have to be removed. I'll enter 4 and I'll click on OK. So top 4 rows are removed. Okay. Now what's the next step that needs to be done? Quickly.
Use first row as a header.
Yeah. Now you see there is one more option here. We know that this first row is nothing but the header, right? So we need to make it header. And for doing that, we have one particular transformation in Power Query Editor. If you look at this, what it says, use first row as headers. So I'll do exactly that. I'll click on this and then suddenly the first row will be header now, right? If you look at this, the first rows have become headers. Now, thing to be noted here is that at the right side panel, I told you that as and when you start doing the transformations, those steps will be enlisted here. Can you see this? This is the source. That is how it was earlier, right? And then from this step, it came to this step where only the top 4 rows were removed. And then it came to this step where after removing the top rows, what was done? The headers were promoted. Clear, people? What is happening with respect to transformations?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's let me show you one more thing. So here, yeah, if you look at this, now what do you think is the next step that needs to be done? Think. Just look at the data and suggest something. Things that can be done to clean the data. Anyone?
Removing null and in.
Removing NAs, agree. Then anything else?
In between rows should be deleted. Blanks row.
There are certain blank rows, right? If you see here, there are certain blank rows. So blank rows need to be deleted, right? And to do that, again, what I'll do, I'll click on remove rows. And in remove rows, there's a thing called as remove blank rows. And if you click on this, the blank rows are gone. As simple as that. And if you look at the transformation step, again, one more transformation has been done here. Okay. And one more thing. If you look at the left-hand side of each transformation step, there's a cross button. Can you see this? So if you click on the cross button, that particular transformation will be removed. As simple as that. It's like undo button, but there's no redo button. Okay. There's no redo in this. Redo in the sense you have to do it once again by clicking or selecting that option like this. Remove the blank rows once again. Okay. And not just that, in some transformations, there is also this gear icon. Can you see this at the right hand side? Okay. Now I'll show you the meaning of this. If you click on the gear icon, that exact step will be shown to you. Like let's say if the transformation step is remove top rows. Then to see how many top rows were removed, you can click on the gear icon. What it says, 4 rows. Okay, but you can alter it as well. Okay, instead of 4, if you want to do 5, you can do that. But however, if you do, if you remove 5 rows now, then what will happen? Yes.
The header row will be also deleted.
Headers will be gone, right? So that's the thing. But however, if you want, you can alter it for sure. Okay, so that's the thing. And one more thing. So here, right now, the data I think is coming from this particular folder, okay, which is this ETL data, and this is called as orders unprocessed. Okay, and if I cut and paste this file somewhere else, let's say in this folder, the folder before that, then do you think immediately this will cause a problem in Power BI? No, right?
No, fresh.
But when will it cause a problem?
And we refresh.
After refresh.
When you try to refresh, let's say if I try to refresh this, then you see it says it cannot find that file, the data source error. Okay, so this is what it is saying. The data or the file itself is not found, or this thing, the list is empty. Okay, so what do we need to do now? Yes, if this is the case,
Need to change the path
we need to change the path. And how to change the path?
from data source setting.
Data source settings, here, change source, and then again browse to the file. So it was this one. So again, I need to point to this and it will be fine. Or what I can do, one more thing is, I can bring the file back to what? Original folder. As simple as that. So both things will work. However, if you want to change the data source settings, that also can be done. So now I've brought the file back to the original folder. Let me refresh again, and the data will appear again. Okay. This you always need to remember. Okay. And the thing is, after each class, okay, and remember this, I will be supplying you this classwork file as well as the assignment files. And along with that, I'll be giving you the data sets as well. Okay. And that classwork file, if you open, okay, by default, its data source settings will be having the path to my computer. Are you getting the point? So in order to use it by yourself, what you need to do? You need to change the path to where the data sets are there in your computer. Hopefully this is clear, people. Else you will get the error.
Yes.
Okay. So that you need to make sure always while doing the classworks or as well as assignments. Okay. So yeah, this is the thing. Then yeah. Now here, let's try to have a look at what kind of data this actually is. Okay. So if you look at all the columns, there's order ID, there's prod ID. Order means the order or transaction ID. Prod ID usually means product ID. Then there is some miscellaneous detail. Then we have the store ID, order date, sales quantity. So basically speaking, this is a sales or transaction based data, revenue, stock, price, okay, the promotion type that was used, and all the details like discount, then delivery date, all these things. Okay, so now the thing here is that this is the sales data, and which one do you think is the primary key in here in this table? Anyone?
Order ID.
Order ID is the primary key. And when we say primary key, I hope you guys know there'll be certain constraints for a primary key. What are those constraints?
It should be unique.
Should not be null.
It should not be null, then
Should be unique.
it should be unique, right? It should not be null and it should be unique values. Okay. So also it should not have values like this or blanks basically. What do we have here? NA values, right? And NA values should not be there because they don't mean anything. First of all, can anyone tell me what's the use of primary key? Why it is exactly used? Yes. Usually they name it as something underscore PK, okay, which means primary key. What's the use
So
of
this
this?
to distribute every row of the data set.
To
Every
come again to
distinguish between every row of data set, every records of the data set.
yes. See, let's say there are n number of transactions that happen per day. Okay, for each transaction, the unique identifier, or basically the identifier, will be the primary key itself. Okay, and even if you look at your transactions that you do on daily basis, basically UPI or anything, bank transaction, each transaction will be having an ID, and that is nothing but the primary key itself. So let's say there are records like the sales amount, and let's say what's the discount, then what's the let's say order date, all these things. So you'll be having one particular set of records. So all these records are identified by one primary key. Okay, so that's the usage of this. So if you just want to know the details of your sales transaction, all you need to do is you need to feed the primary key or basically the order ID there. So you'll get to know what transactions happened. Okay, so it's a unique identifier for each and every record that is that we have in our database. Okay, and definitely unique identifier cannot be having the NA values. Okay, now if we look at these NA values in the order ID and we also look at its corresponding values from other columns, let's have a look at it. Do you think these values are useful from other columns as well? Or do you think they can be neglected?
They can be neglected.
They can be neglected, right? They can definitely be neglected. So here, what I need to do is I can completely get rid of these two NA values. Understanding, people? And how I'll do that? Look, at the right hand side of each and every column header, there'll be a drop down button. Okay. And in the drop down button, you'll be having the distinct value, the distinct values that are present in each and every column. And here what I can do, I can search what? NAs. Okay. And I can unselect NA from this. And if I do that, what will happen? The NAs will be filtered. Understanding this, people?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the thing about this is now it says filtered rows, but the transformation steps, right? As and when the transformations go on becoming more and more, it'll be hard for the third person to read the transformation. So what you can do, you can change the name of these transformations as well according to what you think is appropriate. Like here, instead of filtered rows, I'll double click on this and I'll simply rename it basically to filtered what? NAs, right? This is what I can do so that even if there's any third person who tries to read what has been done in the transformation, so he'll come to know what exactly is happening in a particular step. Okay, so you can rename each and every transformation step without a problem. So that's the thing. Okay, so this is yes.
Pawan, just one question here. Like
Hmm.
for filtering the data, right? I'm seeing here that it is a limitation of the 1,000 record. So what exactly it is?
Come again, it's the limitation
While
of
1,000 records only.
yeah. See here, yeah, it says column profiling based on top 1,000 rows. However, you can change it to one more thing, column profiling based on entire data set.
So, yeah. So like suppose in the preview of the data file, I am seeing the 1,000 records. So when applying the filter, so it is applying on the 1,000 records only or the whole data set?
No. It exists for the whole data set. Okay.
Okay.
So
So for the
whatever
preview
transfer-
purpose, it is showing me only the 1,000 record, but the whatever the steps I'm applying, it is applied for the whole data set.
the whole
It is
data
not
set.
applied. Oh,
No, not just
got
for this thing. Okay. So
okay.
profiling means initial profiling in the sense you are only able to view the top 1,000 records. It's like that. Okay. But whatever steps you apply, those will be applied for the whole data set, not just for the 1,000. Is that clear?
Yeah. And one more question here, Pawan. Like in other ETL transformation, other tool we are using, like so there we used to perform the charts, right? We used to build the charts, graph, we call it, where we have the graph like steps, right? So these steps are the same as there, or it is a different way, or we are doing the same in the Power BI also in the later.
Graphs in the sense, are you talking about the, outcome like the visualizations, or is it within the ETL tool itself according to?
So in the ETL tool, we used to build a graph for any transformation we need to perform, right? In the graph, in terms of, we used to component in the ETL time, and we used to join those components with the line or something else. Basically, I'm using the Pentaho, right? So in
Got
the
it.
Pentaho, yeah. So
Mm.
in Pentaho, like if I want to do filtration, right? So I will select the filter component from the Pentaho, right? And I'll drag that to my graph, and I'll connect that to source of my data. Like if I use the input file or the that's it. So like this, we build the complex graph where we used to perform all the transformation there. So these steps, my question is like these steps, whatever showing on the left side, right side, are the same way, or we will be building the graph in the Power BI also, the same kind of graph, or this is the
See, the
step
thing
only.
is, I'll tell you what these steps are actually. Okay, these steps are like the automation. Automation in the sense. Now let's say, okay, if I just press close and apply, if you see the button close and apply, then what will happen? The data will come into Power BI, and those steps will be done, and that resulting data will be coming into Power BI desktop. If you see this,
Okay.
so it's like you're storing those transformations and bringing that transformed data into Power BI desktop. As simple as that. Okay, but yeah, I know, I get the fact that you have used the dedicated ETL tool where you can, do the graphs and all, but this is not like that. This is this has some limited capabilities. Okay.
So, what exactly the limitation we have from there that tool to this Power Query integrator in terms of transformation into the data?
Limitations in the sense, the main limitation is that if you go on doing more transformations in Power Query editor, right, then the performance of Power BI desktop or your PBIX or your model will take a hit. That itself is the main drawback. Okay, you can do n number of transformations that we hear. That's not a problem. You can add, you can establish the data types. You can add index column, conditional column, custom column, or you can create a date dimension table. Everything can be done. Okay, you can split the columns. You can merge, join. Those things can be done. But if you go on doing all those transformations in Power BI itself, then what will happen? Your reporting end, right, it'll take a hit. Getting the point? Because what will happen when I press the refresh, right? Then what will happen? First, the data from the backend, it will come to this source, and from source, again, it will go on applying all these steps one by one. Okay. And then the refresh times will take a hit, and so will the performance of your Power BI. Okay. So yeah, the main thing I want to address, this is also very important. Whenever you are working in any BI project in any organization, okay. Let's say that this is kind of a standard or let's say that the flagship project or a big project. Okay. So you will be having the dedicated teams. Okay. Like let's say there is the team which will be solely handling the backend. Okay. And it will be the team of data engineers. And sometimes they're also called as the ETL engineers. And then there'll be the BI developers. And apart from that, there'll be some database admins as well, who are responsible for maintaining the database. Because if you work in organizations, there'll be dedicated admins for maintaining, let's say, the sales database, let's say the marketing database. Those people will be there. And what the ETL engineers or data engineers, they will do is they'll get the data from sources and they'll bring the data into data lake or data warehouse. And these will be in the form of different tables or views. Okay. And those views or some of the derived views from those tables, BI developers are responsible to bring it into Power BI or any BI development tool that they are using. Okay. And then there'll be, let's say, the QC team as well, the testing team, who will be doing the testing of the development done by these two people. And obviously there'll be BAs or sometimes they'll also call them as DAs. Okay, so business analysts or data analysts. So these people will be actually in connection with the business end. Now the business end is a team for whom you are developing the dashboards. Okay, so these people are in direct connection with the business end, and any requirement from their side is first communicated to these guys, and based on whether the change needs to happen from this end or this end or this end or even this end, these people are able to communicate with those particular guys. Let's say there is some extra column needs to be added from the back end, and that thing comes from the business end, and they'll inform these people, and these people will inform the ETL engineers because the thing has to be done in the back end. Let's say there is some extra filter that needs to be added in the Power BI. Then again, that requirements come from the business end to these people, and these people will communicate it with the BI developers who have to change the report accordingly. Is that clear, people?
Yeah.
Fine. So yeah, now comes the main question. When you are in a big project, or let's say the flagship project or any standard project in many organizations, this ETL, right, usually almost 90% of the time, the ETL never happens in Power BI. ETL always happens in the dedicated ETL tools like Informatica, Azure Data Factory, or some other dedicated ETL tools. Okay, but then you might ask why we are doing ETL here. The thing is that some of the ETL needs to, I mean, you come to know that some of the transformations need to happen even to the data you are directly bringing from the ETL people. So if you need to do the data transformation within Power BI, even that is possible. And what all is possible within Power Query Editor, we have to know. Because for everything, again, you need not go back to ETL team and be completely reliant on them. Okay, so that is the thing. If there is some changes needed in the front end, and if you find a quick fix within Power BI itself, you need to know what can be done by being in Power BI itself. Hope the point is clear, people. Yes or no?
Yeah.
However, again, I'm telling you, whenever you're working with a dedicated ETL tool, you will never see this kind of data. Okay, this kind of unclean data you will never come across when you're working in any organization. ETL will always give you the transform data, which is almost every time it's ready to use. There might be some quick fixes that might be needed, which however you can do it within Power BI itself, or if you think the fix is not possible from the Power BI end, you can again connect with the ETL and tell them that this particular transformation is needed. Okay, if that's the case. But however, we are learning the Power BI, and hence we need to understand the Power Query Editor tool completely. What all transformations are possible, and hence I'm doing it in Power Query Editor. Okay, is that clear, people? Okay. So yeah, the only goal is to use Power Query Editor to its maximum capability so that our understanding becomes greater. Okay. So what we did, we filter the NA values. Okay. And then let's try to also see if there are certain columns that can be removed completely. Okay. And how can you know? If you just click on the drop down, then you'll see what values are there in that particular column. Now, if you see, there's this particular column that is miscellaneous details, and all the values in that column are either blank or nulls or NAs. Can you see this? So do you think such column is even necessary or needed? No, right? So what you can do, you can remove that column. You can simply just right click on this column header and remove it, or you can simply click on this one as well. At the top, you can see remove column. You can remove that. Okay, so there are multiple ways. And let's go on checking some other columns as well. There's order date, which is fine. Sales quantity, very important. Revenue, stock, price, promotion type, and there is bin, this is some kind of column which has certain values, and there are certain blanks, but also there are certain values like high, very low, moderate, which might be of some significance. And then let's look at some other columns. Promo type 2 has distinct values. Then bin2, let's have a look at this. Again, the bin2 column only either has blanks or NS. So again, this can be removed. Similarly, there's one more column called as discount column. Again, it also has blanks or NS. So that also can be removed. And one more thing, if you want to remove multiple columns, okay, so what you can do, you can simply select both the columns simultaneously by control selecting them, and you can click on remove columns. Okay, and now there is one thing to be noted. Now, if you remember, how many times I removed the columns till now?
3 times.
2 times.
Two
Twice.
times, right? In the first instance, I removed one column. In the second instance, I removed two columns at once. So basically, I removed the columns twice, right? However, if you look at applied steps, how many times removed columns is mentioned? Only once, right? So what happens is that Power Query Editor, if let's say the steps that you're performing here are similar, then it consolidates those multiple steps into a single step. Understanding the point, people?
Yeah.
This is very important to understand, okay? Now let's say if I remove this step, if I cancel this step, now all the columns that I removed are again there. Can you see the miscellaneous detail is what I removed initially? It has come back. And then in the second step, what I did, I removed, which one? I think the bin2 and the discount column. I removed these two at once. They are also there, okay? So the thing to be remembered is that whenever you perform the similar kind of transformations, those transformations will become consolidated into single step by Power Query Editor. And this it does to optimize the performance, nothing else, okay? And also let me show you, there's one more way to remove the columns. If you look at this, there's an option called as choose columns, okay? So if you look at choose columns, again, there is two options. One is choose columns and another is go to column. I'll tell you the significance of both. First, let's look at choose columns. So here in the choose column, right, we can unselect the columns that we don't want and those columns will be deleted. So which one I deleted? The miscellaneous detail I did not want, and then bin2 and discount. So here simply what I'm doing, I'm unselecting the columns that I want to be removed. And if I click on OK, then again you see the removed columns step has appeared again. So those columns are removed at once. Is it clear, people?
Yes.
And within choose columns, there's one more thing, that is go to column. Now, when this will be helpful, I'll tell you. Let's say your table consists of some 30 to 40 columns itself, okay? And if it contains 30 to 40 columns, you'll find it hard to find one particular column of one particular name just by sliding from left to right. It'll be hard to find. So in order to go to that particular column, what you can do, choose columns and go to column. And among that, you can search for value here. You can even type and search, or if you find it here itself, let's say if I want to go to delivery date column. So I'll click on delivery date and it will take me to delivery date column. Clear, people?
Yeah.
Any doubts about the things that we discussed today? Yes.
So we like remove the NA, right?
Mhm.
But suppose the data is like that. One row, like one column has NA, but other rows has valid data. So
Ah.
that will also get removed, right?
Exactly. So what you mean is, from order ID, in order ID there is NA, but it has legit values in other columns. That's what you mean, right?
Correct.
So if that is the case, I mean, if you think the values in other columns are useful or some significant values, however, in order ID it is having NA record, then only thing you can do is you can connect with the backend, that is the data team, and check what is the primary key for that. And if it doesn't have a primary key, it's their duty to create a primary key for that. Because you cannot simply neglect the records for the sake of it. Because each and every record here, it means something to the business, right? It has certain sales quantity, it has certain revenue that has been generated. So you cannot simply delete the values if they have the actual values in here. Getting the point, people?
Mm. Yes, got it.
Any other doubt from anyone? Fine. If there are no further doubts, then let me stop the recording first.